Good morning, everybody. I hope you had a comfortable stay last night and you're all fresh and raring to go, looking forward to another 6 hours of talks. Uh, what we were doing yesterday, we were looking at the, you can say the optimization perspective for this problem of parameter estimation. So I want to develop on that theme further and look at, briefly talk about linear algebra interpretation and then very briefly talk about the statistical interpretation. So as again, the idea is that this is such a nice concept, the solution that we get, the least square solution, that you can derive it in various ways and every time you get the same solution. I mean, so it's really a very powerful result and elegant as well. Okay. So what we had been doing yesterday, we said, okay, we have some model of this form. Y is some variable, the response variable or dependent variable we call it, and x is an independent variable. Okay. And we are given n values for x, n values for y, and we want to find these parameters a and b. We are also allowed to accept an error in each of these equations. We have n such equations. So the question was, given these pairs of y and x values, what is the best, or what's your estimate of a and b? Okay. So we said, okay, if you simply do a degrees of freedom analysis, you have n equations and n plus 2 unknowns. So you have infinite solutions, but then you put an optimization spin on it, put an objective function and say, okay, I can fix those two unknowns if I decide to optimize some objective function. Okay. The objective function we said was sum of squares of these errors. You can minimize those with respect to the unknown parameters a and b, and then you do some calculus and you will get some estimated values for a and b by solving these two equations. Okay. Essentially coming from the necessary condition of optimality, which says that these derivatives at the optimal solution, these two derivatives have to be 0. Okay. So this was using, you can say, the scalar approach, where we differentiate the objective function with respect to each parameter separately. The same algebra can be worked out much more compactly and powerfully if we start working with vectors and matrices. So this is where our the maths ideas really, I mean, so basically it's still maths. As engineers, we know that lot of concepts in maths are not very difficult, but the notation really makes it difficult. It takes a long time to get used to the notation. Okay. So that's the common problem or common issue which students have when you start dealing with some topic. Initially they find it very difficult. So everything is new. What is capital X, small x, epsilon? But if you persist, after a while, once the notation sinks in, then it becomes a lot easier. And actually the concepts themselves are not that difficult, but notation, I mean, there is no shortcut to it. It takes a while to get used to. So if we exploit the vector matrix notation or vector matrix representation, then this problem becomes a lot easier to solve. So essentially finding those unknown parameters, you essentially get this nice compact solution using that optimization approach. This A transpose A inverse A transpose Y. This is called as the least squares solution. Very powerful result and well known. So this A matrix was this matrix. Essentially this is the matrix of two columns, a column of 1 which corresponds to coefficient of this parameter a in your equation, y equal to a plus bx you had, and this is the column of x1, x2 till xn, which were the coefficients of the second parameter b which you want to estimate. So essentially you assemble the matrix of these coefficients of a and b. This is again the given dependent variables, the vector of those variables, capital Y. So once you have these two, y and a, you can get a solution for the unknown parameters by simply doing this calculation. Okay. So softwares like MATLAB and all, they do this for you, and of course it's not, you can do it in any software. Fine. So this was using this solution. So if you look at, just recall this solution, this we obtained just by optimization. We minimize some objective function which was essentially the sum of the squares of those errors. Okay. So we minimize this objective function with respect to the unknown parameter vector theta, which is essentially a vector of a and b, and we got this solution. So that's the optimization perspective. Somebody who teaches optimization will say yes, you can derive the solution by optimization. Somebody who loves linear algebra can also derive this using a geometric interpretation. Okay. So the idea here again is very it's very intuitive and very nice. So if you recall what we have been doing since school days, if you give me a vector in 2 dimensions, okay, let's say I have 2 dimensions and I am given some vector, okay, I want to represent this vector on, let's say, this x direction, or okay, so this we talk about is unit vectors I and j. Okay, it could be anything. I want to supposing represent this vector in this along this horizontal vector. Okay, what is that corresponding representation? We essentially draw a perpendicular, right, and say okay, this vector, the representation of this vector. So essentially this vector can be represented as this plus this, right? That's one representation. You could of course have, this is the representation we normally use. Okay, so if this vector is of length, let's say, I mean, if this is a, this is your theta, then we know it's a cos theta or a sin theta, the perpendicular one, or whatever it is. So, but what you want to just again recall or notice that, see, this really, so essentially what we are doing, we are breaking this vector, the original vector, as a addition of 2 vectors. But this breaking is not unique, this separation. I could also have written it as a sum of these 2 vectors, right? So I can do it in many ways. I represent this vector as some vector, and what is common in these 2 pictures is what is on the horizontal axis. So in both cases there is one vector in this I direction or this x direction. Okay, the other vector is changing, but this vector is in this direction, and in this picture also it's in this direction. Okay, so that way this vector, the original vector, can be represented as a sum of 2 vectors, one lying in this I direction and the other not in the I direction, somewhere else. So in many ways, this is in the I direction here, in this picture also in the I direction. However, so there are many ways to represent this. However, if you say that okay, give me that representation, I want to break this original vector, I want to write this as a vector lying in this direction plus some other vector, subject to whatever is this remaining vector, the length of this should be minimum, the smallest. If you insist that, then the solution is that okay, now your representation should be such that this angle should be 90 degree. Okay, in this case, this length that you are going to get, okay, this length will be much bigger than the length that you get in this case. I have not drawn it correctly. Okay, so this is a fundamental result in linear algebra, that if I want to, essentially what you are doing is taking this vector, oops, my hand covers that, you are taking this vector and you want to project it in this direction, okay, such that the unprojected part, the part which is not in that direction, that is of minimum length, then your projection should be such that this unprojected part should be orthogonal or perpendicular, okay, to the direction in which you have projected it. Fine. So if we use this idea, we apply to our problem of parameter estimation, actually we will get back the same solution. Okay, it's nothing but you are projecting a vector on some other direction. Okay. So if I were to really think of the problem of the parameter estimation that we have, see what is it? Okay, if you see what the equations that we had, they were of the following form. So we had y1, y2 till yn. So this we had called as vector y is equal to 1 x1, 1 x2 till 1 xn times ab plus epsilon 1, epsilon 2 till epsilon n. Okay, so this was the problem. Given this vector y, given this matrix which we had called as A, okay, given these two, the question was what are A and B, and of course we also did not know what these errors are, right? Now we want to see, okay, can we solve it using the same idea of projection? Now I am going to think of this capital Y as a vector. Okay, this Y is a vector in, now of course it has n components, so it's no more in 2 dimensions, it's in n dimensions. Okay, it's a in n dimensional coordinate system. I can represent this as a vector, so it's in Rn. Okay, each entry is a real number. As far as projection goes, now if you see what is it I am trying to do, I can write this vector Y. Okay, if you see this equation, I can also, okay, I can equivalently write this equation in the following form. This vector y1, y2 till yn, I can write it as a column of 1s multiplied by a plus x1, x2 till xn multiplied by b, plus there is this error vector. Okay. The same equation which I have written up. So y1 is 1 times a plus x1 times b. Okay, I can write the same thing. Y1 is 1 times a plus x1 times b. Okay, similarly for y2, 1 times a plus x2 times b. So here also it's y2 is 1 times a plus x2 times b. I have simply written that vector y as not as a matrix times another vector, but as a linear combination of 2 column vectors, this vector multiplied by some constant a plus this vector multiplied by some constant b, right? And then there is an error part. This is the part which essentially is not captured by this particular term, the unexplained or the unrepresented part. So there is certain part which is captured by this. So this y is written as 2 terms. One is this part before the plus sign, and other is the second part. So what I am heading to is that projection idea. You have a vector in n dimension, you want to break it into 2 components. One component is given by this, and this is the second component. And remember, in optimization we said we want to minimize the sum of squares of these. So it essentially is very similar to that projection problem. I want to write this as sum of 2 vectors. One is essentially this particular vector. I can write it as a plus bx1, a plus bx2, and so on. This vector, and there is the unexplained part. Now see this part for me is, of course, to just, if you want to see it more clearly, I can write it as a plus bx1, a plus bx2, a plus bxn plus epsilon 1, epsilon 2, epsilon n. Okay. So I am trying to write this vector y as a sum of 2 vectors. One is this vector and the other is this vector. So the question again I can ask is, what should be this representation? What should be this component such that the unexplained part is minimized? So to answer that, I have to see, okay, where am I projecting? How do I characterize this vector? In the diagram which I had drawn, see, in the diagram which I had drawn, you could write this vector a. So this a is not our a, let me call it as some, let's say u. Okay, this u vector was some scalar alpha times this direction I, let me say I hat, to indicate the unit vector of unit length in that direction, plus there was an unexplained component, this epsilon, in, let's say, the part which was not captured by this I hat. Okay, so let me say in this case it turned out to be, our optimal solution turned out to be that this has to be orthogonal. So this is direction j, let's say j hat. Yeah, so something similar I want to do now for that vector in n dimension, which is my capital Y, okay, which is of the form a theta plus epsilon. Okay, so now I want to say, I want to find the parameter vector theta over here, just like here I have to find this alpha. Okay, and what we said was this alpha, you will get this alphas such that the length of this error is minimize provided this unexplained part, this vector is orthogonal to whatever is your I direction. Okay. So same thing we are going to try here. So I want to project this vector y in some direction. Now what is that direction? This vector, how do I characterize this particular vector? I can write this from this expression. If you see, these two are the same, right? This is a plus x1, a plus x2, which is a plus bx1, a plus bx2, and so on, which is what I've written over here. If you really see this vector, I am writing it as this vector times a plus this vector times b. I'm taking an addition of two vectors. So all of these are in Rn, so it's very difficult to draw accurate pictures. See, the length of this vector is n dimensional, it's n cross 1, and this is also n cross 1. Okay, and this is also n cross 1. So really all of these are in Rn. So you can't visualize, but still we can try to draw some pictures. So if you really think of what is happening over here, okay, it's the following. See, this is my original vector y, this is my vector y over here. Okay, if you think of it, I am trying to represent it in a plane. That plane is defined as a combination of two vectors. This is vector, let me call as vector v1, this is v2, where v1 is a vector of ones and v2 is x1, x2 till xn. Okay. So really if you think of what is happening, let me again just draw this, just write this equations again. I wanted to write y1, y2 till yn as 1, 1, 1 times a plus x1, x2 till xn times b, plus there is an unexplained part. So this I am calling as vector v1, this I am calling as vector v2, this is my vector y. So really what I am trying to do is write this y, this vector y, as what? v1 times some unknown coefficient, this is what I have determined, plus v2 times another unknown coefficient, right? And there will be an unexplained part. So this is what I am trying to do. If you see in this geometry, see this is vector v1, vector of ones, and this is vector v2. So what you are really doing is v1 times a plus v2 times b. What does that give you? That gives you something over here. Okay, this vector would be, I am adding a times v1 plus b times v2. I'll get some other vector over here. Let's say this is for any given a and b, a v1 plus b v2. So as you change a and b, see a and b are the unknowns to you, right? This v1 and v2 are already given to you. So this line, it's not turning out to be a straight line, it should have been a straight line. For some values of a and b, so you choose a and b. Somebody will say, oh, a is 2, b is 3. Okay, that's one solution of this equation, right? You can choose whatever a and b you want. I'll get some epsilon vector over here so that these equations will be satisfied. Okay, question is we want to come up with some reasonable values of a and b, some systematic way of deciding those values. So now from this picture, if you see, you take any a and b, you will get some value of a v1 plus b v2, and what you are simply saying is y is equal to this vector a v1 plus b2 plus there is an unexplained part which is epsilon. As I change a and b, for some other values of a and b, let's say this, say I'm just drawing it, some other values I will get a v1 plus b v2 over here, and my epsilon vector will be then this, right? So for example, if a is 1 and b is 0, this is my a v1 plus b v2, a is 1 and b is 0, this is my epsilon vector. So depending on what a and b you choose, you get some representation of y in this plane. What is this plane? Essentially, what is this called? How do I characterize this plane? This plane represents whatever is this within this dashed rectangle. It's actually a plane where any vector can be represented by an appropriate linear combination of v1 and v2. So it's a plane spanned by these two vectors v1 and v2. Just like in 2 dimensions x and y, if you give me these two basis vectors, okay, any other vector can be written as this vector times something plus this vector times something. I can have another vector. This is like my basis vectors. Okay, can use a red pen, sorry, blue pen. See, this is my basis vectors over here. In 2 dimension, any other vector can be represented as a combination of these two vectors. Okay, here the basis vectors which characterize that space are given by this v1 and v2, which is coming from your problem. v1 was column of 1s and v2 was column of x1 till xn. Okay, it could be anything, it doesn't matter. The point is that as you keep changing your a and b, you keep getting different vectors over here. For some values of a and b, this is the vector you get, some other value, this is the vector you get, some other value, this is the vector you get, and correspondingly the error vector, the unexplained part, keeps changing. In one case this is the unexplained part, in other case this is the unexplained part, third case this is the unexplained part. Now we apply the idea, okay, just like we did in the 2 dimensions. If I want this error vector to be of minimum length, okay, what is the property we had in 2 dimensions? This error vector had to be perpendicular. Now of course I have to be a little more careful. Perpendicular to what now? It has to be perpendicular to this plane, which in turn means it has to be perpendicular to v1 and v2. If it is perpendicular to both v1 and p2, or both v1 and v2, it will be perpendicular to any vector in that plane. Okay, that's it. This is what I am going to say. Choose that a and b, such that this resulting error vector is perpendicular to v1 and perpendicular to so this, it's perpendicular to both a and b, or any combination, in fact, sorry, perpendicular to both v1 and v2, or any combination of v1 v2. So essentially, see, if I say it's perpendicular to v1 and perpendicular to v2, it will be perpendicular to any combination of those. Okay, that's it. This is the condition I am going to impose. Okay, how do I write this error? How do I write this error itself as? So really in this for this specific case, see, we can generalize it later on. So really, I mean, in this 2 parameter case, what we are saying is, this is my vector y. I want to project it on a plane defined by 2 vectors v1 and v2. So you choose some a and b. Okay, this is your a v1 plus b v2, and for this a and b you get some error vector. So you want this error vector to be perpendicular to v1 as well as error vector to be perpendicular to v2, right? So perpendicular means dot product of those 2 vectors should be 0. Epsilon 1 into v1 plus epsilon 2 into v2 should be equal to 0. Okay, or what I am writing is epsilon transpose v1, epsilon transpose v2 is equal to 0. So this is the condition you are imposing. Okay, so I can, okay, I think for simplicity let me write it other way, v1 transpose epsilon and v2 transpose epsilon equal to 0. And what is epsilon for me? So now I still have to bring in a and b. Where will a and b come from? Now I will write epsilon. What is epsilon for me? Epsilon is nothing but whatever was the original vector y minus a v1 plus b v2 for whatever choice of a and b you have. What I do know is that you should choose a and b, okay, such that this holds. So v1 transpose, your error error is nothing but y minus a v1 minus b v2. A and b are your unknowns to choose. Okay, this is v2. This is equal to 0, and similarly v2 transpose y minus a v1 minus b v2 equal to 0. That's it. These two equations you got. What are the unknowns you have? You know v1, you know y. The unknowns are a and b alone. You know v1, v2, you know y. Okay. Again, two equations. Now two unknowns a and b, you solve them, and the nice thing is you will get back the same solution, okay, what you had earlier. Fine. So essentially this problem is a problem of obtaining, so I have this, the solution in generalized notation, but this is what is happening. So if you just solve this two equations, you will get the same value for a and b what we got using that optimization idea. Okay. So this is a linear algebra perspective, vector space perspective. You are essentially trying to represent a vector. Okay, you are trying to project it on some vector space on this rectangle. Okay, this rectangle essentially goes inside the board, and this rectangle is defined by those vectors which can be represented as combination of these two basis vectors v1 and v2. So you get back your same solution for these coefficients a and b. Okay, what the solution which we got from optimization. Okay, so this is what this particular thing is saying. So I wrote in terms of v1 v2. This A matrix is essentially for us, the matrix A was those two columns. So this was column v1, this was column v2, both put together we had called as matrix A, and what is written over here is A transpose, which means that actually v1 transpose, and this is your error epsilon, v1 transpose that is equal to 0, and v2 transpose this error is equal to 0. Okay, same thing we are writing but now in compact notation. Fine. So this is the condition which you get from your linear algebra projection idea. No optimization, I mean no fancy way of choosing any objective function, just you are trying to project one vector onto some surface such that whatever is this unprojected part, this is of minimum length. Okay, so you are saying okay, this will happen provided this unprojected part is orthogonal to this surface on which you are projecting. Okay, and that orthogonality condition is this. It has to, if it has to be orthogonal, it has to be orthogonal to every column in this matrix A. Okay, so that's it. You solve this. Okay, and if you just simplify, this is theta hat is your unknown vector of which has A and B as the entries. So if you solve this, so really the equation, so the same equation in the slides, it's written in terms of A transpose y minus A theta is equal to 0 or theta hat equal to 0. Theta hat is because we are now choosing a specific value of that parameter theta, or you simplify it as A transpose y minus A transpose A theta hat is 0, or which implies that A transpose A theta hat is equal to A transpose y or theta hat is A transpose A inverse A transpose y. Okay. So you got back your, and this is what we had got through optimization as well. Okay. So we get back the same solution, but purely from a purely linear algebra point of view, simply vector spaces. Okay. Yeah. 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 So that's a very good point, that A transpose A has to be assumed to be invertible. So really, if you see the matrix A, what does it mean? So A transpose A has to be invertible. Essentially, in matrix terms, what this means is this matrix A, we are saying that both these columns are independent. It has rank 2. Okay, the rank of this matrix is the same as the number of columns of this, and it's easy to see why that condition is there. So really, if you choose, for example, if you choose all the x's to be the same, x1 is same as x2, same as xi, same as xn. So even though you are saying I have n observations? Okay, they are all the same. Okay, you have y1 is equal to a plus bx1, y2 is also equal to a plus bx2. Okay, so really there is no way for you to, you can say, estimate a and b independently. Yeah, so see, this is a usual, I mean, yeah, without going too much into it, so this is an assumption as you pointed out. So that's something you have to worry about before you do that A transpose A inverse. This this matrix has to be of full rank. See, what happens is, of course, see what can happen. For example, your problem can be ill-posed, so that A matrix will not be full rank if either your data is not collected properly or problem is ill-posed. So let me put it this way. Supposing I want to estimate something of this form. Okay, A plus B plus Cx 1 plus epsilon 1, y2 is A plus B. Oops, I have to get used to this switching. Supposing I am estimating parameters now A, B, C. I am estimating 3 parameters. Okay, supposing I have a problem of this type, n could be whatever, n could be 1000, I could have given 1000 values, but you want to now estimate A, B and C. Okay, if you now write the A matrix for this, that capital A matrix for this, it will be column of ones corresponding to coefficient of A, then another column of ones corresponding to coefficient of B, and another column of x1, x2 till xn corresponding to coefficient for C. If you now look at this matrix, these two columns are exactly the same, the first two columns. So there are only 2 independent columns in this. Okay, and you will have problem when you try to do A transpose A inverse, it does not exist. Okay, that's the maths part or the matrix part. Really physically if you see what this is telling you, there is no way you can separately tell me what is, uniquely tell me what is A and B. If you say A is 10 and B is 5, if you give me a solution of A as 10, okay, and B as 5, I can also have another solution. I can have another solution where A is, so okay, A as A, B, one solution is there 10, 5. Another solution could be, they could be, let's say 9 and 6. In both the cases, A plus B is the same, whether it's 10, 5, 9, 6, which means that these errors will exactly be the same, okay, provided C is chosen to be the same. Okay, so essentially there is no way you can uniquely estimate A and B. Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. So this is the modeling construct. I mean, you can ask the modeler, but if you want to estimate, so this is not a good idea. I mean, so whether we require or not, yes. When would we require such separate estimation of A and B? I don't know. But supposing you want to pose a problem in this form, then you're going to run into trouble as far as the maths is concerned, and for a reason. Because the way the A and B are occurring, what will be unique will be their sum, A plus B. A plus B is important. There is no way you can separately tell me what is A, what is B. Because every time what is occurring is simply A plus B. The same term is appearing. Okay. So as you said, so physically also would I need this? Probably not. But in case you were to formulate a problem in this form, you will run into some issues in the maths part. Okay. So sometimes, I mean, see, for 1 parameter, 2 parameter probably it's easy to see. Sometimes you can have, see, when you have large number of variables, see the where this thing becomes problem is where this issue comes up and they are not so obvious to deal with is, see, when supposing you have 2, let's say 2 variables x1 and x2, and you could have several of other, let's say dx3 and let's say till whatever, let's say e x4 and so on. See, now what can happen, these x1 and x2 are possibly physically different variables. In a process, x1 could be flow rate at some inlet, x2 could be flow rate at the outlet. Okay, if I draw some chemical process, something is coming in, it goes to some other particular units, and something else happens and you get something. So this is your x1, this is your x2. Y could be something you are interested in out of this product, maybe some this process, maybe some product or so on. So you think that x1 is flow rate in the inlet, x2 is flow rate at the outlet, and you say, okay, something, maybe the yield of this particular process, how much useful product it generates, depends on these two flow rates. This could be kilogram per hour, this could be kilogram per hour, and you can put both of them in the equation. But what is unknown to you is really x1 is actually same as x2. They cannot vary independently. Okay, so x1 and x2 will take the same values at all times, and as a result you will think they are separate. I mean, you don't pay attention to it, so you will put them as separate parameters, but really what is happening is the model that you have is right, and other terms, x3 terms and x4 terms. Okay, because x2 is equal to x1, but it's not so obvious to you, or you didn't pay attention to it. You thought it's a different variable because yes, it has a different name. It has a different name. It is coming out. It's a stream which is coming out from somewhere else. But because of some fundamental relationship, mass balances, we know. I mean, if you pay attention, you will know that this has to be same as this. Okay. So for simple one or two parameter, yes, you will never put a plus b. But in large number of when you have variables, this thing can creep in these problems. Okay, so this is known as the problem of multi-collinearity. These two vectors are collinear. Essentially, they are, one is the x2 is some constant times x1. Okay, they are lying on top of each other, these two vectors. Okay, so again the problem is the same. You really can only estimate b plus c, but you cannot tell me separately what is b and separately what is c. And if you don't pay attention, you make a separate column for x1, separate column for x2, separate column for x3, and so on. You will again run into the problem A transpose A will not be invertible, because these two columns x1 and x2 will essentially be linearly will be dependent. Both are not independent. Fine. The problem is, say, more certain. Actually, what will happen in practical situations is you will probably not get x1 exactly equal to x2, but x1 will be more or less equal to x2, or so see, x1 x2 will be very similar to each other, but not on top of each other, but they will be very close. So that A transpose A, theoretically it is invertible, but numerically it will be very hard to invert it. Okay, so you will run into numerical issues while inverting it. Okay, so the condition number will come into play. I guess Sachin is talking something about that. So so in large number, when you have large number of variables, okay, that's where again, how do you invert that matrix? How do you identify which columns are not independent? All those comes into picture. Okay, that becomes a non-trivial issue. Right? Yeah. Yeah.
If it is perpendicular to both V1 and V2,
yeah.
so it is perpendicular to any linear combination.
Yes.
So then A and B would be not be non-unit, right? How can you get a single combination like this?
No, see, no, okay. See, we are saying give me that combination.
Both conditions would not hold.
Okay. Yeah. What so?
Means is the span, you just take orthogonal projection of the vector y onto the linear span of v1 and v2.
Yeah, that's the final thing.
But just writing
It
with
will be perpendicular to both the basis vectors.
Yeah. So
just
see,
taking
this whatever is this,
so this will not have the problem.
whatever is this error vector. Okay, this error vector is what you are saying is now perpendicular to v1, and that is also perpendicular to v2.
I can write multiply those two equations by any constant.
Yes.
Still the equation will be valid.
Yes.
So that means A and B will not be unique.
No, A and B is not defining your error vector, right?
I'm just taking the first equation because everyone transpose is equal to 0.
Correct.
Multiply that by A1.
Correct. Some alpha and beta.
And then I take the sum, it still becomes alpha V1 transpose plus alpha V1 transpose plus beta V2 transpose is equal to 0. So that is another vector which is perpendicular. So again that is a solution.
Yeah. See. Okay. see what is happening is with a particular, see for, okay, there are two things. One is, see this A and B, what is the role this is playing? This A and B is essentially fixing your error vector. Okay, once you fix A and B, error vector gets fixed, correct? Because error is defined as y minus AV1 plus BV2, and somehow we find A and B by solving this or any other equation. Now your error vector is fixed. What I am saying is this error vector has now, what is the property? That this error vector is perpendicular to any vector in this particular vector space. Okay, so I could write this error vector would be perpendicular to 2v1 plus 3v2. This will hold. 5v1 plus 6v2. This will also hold. Where, how is your error vector defined? Error vector now is already defined. You have fixed it. Error vector is already fixed it. Y minus AV1 minus AV2 with BV2 with A and B coming from solution of this equation. That's what I am saying. The error vector is now fixed. Once you fix A and B using these two equations, your error vector gets fixed. And this error vector has the property that it is perpendicular to any linear combination alpha v1 plus beta v2. Because this error, see this is the original vector y, this is the plane on which I am projecting. This is my error vector. I fixed it. Now you can keep moving in this plane anywhere. It doesn't matter. This error vector is perpendicular to this plane.
We can move on.
Yeah.
Try to convince.
Yeah. So see this A and B are obtained just based on this condition that this error vector has to be, once you fix A and B, error vector gets fixed, right? And what I am saying is you fix the A and B such that this error vector becomes orthogonal to this plane. And the condition of orthogonality to the plane is essentially imposed by saying it is orthogonal to these two individual vectors v1, v2.
See, it's like you have the v1, v2, you take the plane spanned by these two, okay, and you have a vector y. You want to find the distance of y from this plane. What we observed in one variable case is that the distance has to be perpendicular. Okay, so what you are looking at is orthogonal projection of y onto this linear span of these two. That happens to be perpendicular. That's my inner term. Okay, so using that idea, we are finding now A and B. What should be the derivation?
Yeah, so see that there are two things. One is A and B, because A, B is also gives you a particular linear combination, A v1 plus B v2. Okay, and essentially that is used to define this error vector. Okay, and now you take, and once you fix it, now you forget this. Now the property is that this error vector is perpendicular to any linear combination for that matter. Okay. Correct. Correct. That's what. Yeah. So this condition ensures that epsilon is minimum. Okay.
So that whatever you were saying,
Yeah.
it will be perpendicular to each and every. That means you can have a lot of. So you can't have it. You will ideally solution and it will not be.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go ahead. So essentially through this geometric interpretation, again we get this solution that A transpose A inverse A transpose Y. This is the same picture. Okay, I had it in the slides of what we are doing. Skip this. You can also define, see it was, we wanted to minimize the length of that epsilon vector by that projection. That length could be defined in various ways, just by like we are doing in optimization. So you can define what is called as a weighted least square, where you give different weightings to different error terms, and what you will get is a weighted least square solution where W is a weighting matrix. So there are different variations of this basic least squares idea. This slide generalizes it to more than 2 parameters. Now you have, let's say, n plus 1 parameters, theta naught to theta n. Oh, I think there is, I'm sorry, there is a typo here. This should have been m, okay, theta m, because you have to zm. You have n values, but the number of unknowns are theta naught to theta m. Okay. So, but the same idea, vector y is represented as linear combination of columns of this matrix, okay, and you can use the same ideas, either optimization or projection. Your solution form continues to remain the same, A transpose A inverse, A transpose Y. You just compute this A matrix appropriately. Fine. Further, you can show that if you are doing from optimization, if you can show that with this value of theta, your length of the error is minimized by taking the second derivative, okay, and showing that the second derivative is a positive definite matrix. Okay. So essentially, there is some optimal, J is achieving an optimal value at this theta, at this value of theta, but is it the maximum value or the minimum value? For that you can look at the second derivative, okay, and you can show that this is the minimum value. To look at an example, okay, let's look at this example of two variables. So there are two x variables, x1 and x2. x1 is temperature and x2 is pressure. So you are doing, in a lab, you are doing some experiment at various temperature and pressure combinations, and every time you are getting some yield, okay, you are making some product. So for every kilogram of the raw material you put in, how many kilograms of product you are getting, that expressed in percentages is the yield. So as a chemical engineer, I would want to maximize this, choose those values of C and P, or temperature and pressure, so that this is maximized. Okay, so for that I want to understand how this guy behaves as a function of temperature and pressure. Okay, so this is, let's say, the data given to you. So yesterday there was a question, how do you visualize it in 3 dimensions? So this is the yield, okay, on this axis, and then you have temperature on this axis and pressure on this axis, and all these dots are the given observations to you. Okay, so this is the given data, and what you want to do is you want to fit a model between them. Y is equal to, this is your y is equal to A times x1 plus B times x2 plus C. Okay, a linear model you want to fit. And if I were to show you, I think I have in this is the fitted model. Okay, y is equal to, actually this is the fitted surface. I can show you better. I don't have in this presentation, but I have generated some other plots. I can show it to you in MATLAB. So really this is what you are doing. So this is your y, this is your x1, and this is your x2. All these crosses, the x are the given observations, and what you see over here is a surface which has been fitted. Okay, so see, this is where now all these tools are really helpful to us. You can do all sort of fancy viewing. Okay, so you are really, this is what you are fitting. You are fitting a surface. So all these points are scattered in 3 dimensions. You are passing a surface somewhere in that 3-dimensional region. What is the property of this surface? This is your fitted surface with A and B. That sum of squares of distance of this point from this surface plus this point from this surface plus this point from this surface and so on, that is minimized, right? So this is your residual. What is the distance of, this is the given vector, given value, given observation y, and this is what is lying on this plane, the corresponding value. If I look at that distance square plus this distance square plus this distance square and so on, that is minimized by this surface. Okay, any other surface you choose, that distance will not be minimized. Fine. Okay. So what I have in the presentation is the two are not superimposed, the original data and the fitted surface. In that plot, I had superimposed on the same in the same figure. So this is the coefficients that you get, your A plus B x1 plus C x2. Okay. So that's your multiple linear regression problem, and once you have the model you can do further analysis. In fact, tomorrow I'll talk to you about how these types of models can be used to actually optimize something. So there is this area of response surface methods where the idea would be you build such a model, you are operating, so maybe the current practice is to operate the reactor at this pressure 1.6 atmosphere and 90 degrees centigrade temperature. So you are operating somewhere and you say, okay, I am willing to change my pressure and temperature conditions so that my yield is maximized. So what should I do? So tomorrow I will talk about response surface methods, where the idea is you build such models around your current operating region, and from this model you can say in which direction should I move now, how should I change x1 and x2 so that y increases. From here you can see that, okay, if I increase x1, y increases because this coefficient is positive, and if I increase x2, y again increases, this coefficient is positive, right? And you also know the relative magnitudes of increase. So you can actually decide steps, how much should I change x2 by, how much should I change x1 by, and you move to a different location. See, the thing in practice in actual operations is you will not be allowed to change this x1 and x2 by a large amount. If I'm a refinery, I'm producing something, okay, I know I'm getting some product. As the operator or the manager, he will not say, oh, suddenly you change pressure from 90 to 105. He will say, no, I will not let you do it, because what if my plant stops working, law of it is something bad happens. So you can only change it marginally, maybe 1 degree, okay. So you change it slowly, you change by a small amount, not slowly, by a small amount, okay. And what amount you figure out from these coefficients, you change it, go to a new location, again fit a surface, get some data, fit a surface, again see which direction should you move, till you find that you can improve no further. You will actually reach a region where you have to fit a quadratic model, linear model will not be adequate, okay. So you know that you have reached some optima. So that is something I'll briefly talk about tomorrow, okay. For now we are just focusing on, okay, we have got these coefficients using that A transpose A inverse A transpose Y idea. Another point I want to make is that this multiple linear regression where you had more than where you had two you can say independent variables x1, x2, it also occurs in situations where actually you have only one independent variable but it is occurring in different forms. Let me show what I mean by this. If you look at this particular problem, okay, we want to now explain boiling point as a function of the carbon atoms, okay, for a series of hydrocarbons, okay. These are homologous hydrocarbons, essentially all of them can be explained by a similar chemical formula. So you have the boiling point, you have the number of carbon atoms, and you want to say, okay, can I predict boiling point as a function of these number of carbon atoms, okay. You can fit a straight line model between this boiling point, which is T, and the number of carbon atoms, which is N, A plus B N plus epsilon. So see, these are the given values, these circles are the given values, okay. This red line is the fitted straight line using our idea of this least squares, okay. You can also fit a quadratic model. You can say boiling point is a quadratic function of the number of carbon atoms. So I have alpha plus beta n plus gamma n square, okay. So and you will get some other fit, this is the quadratic fit, this blue line is the quadratic fit that you have got, okay. In both cases your solution remains the same, that A transpose, or the solution formula, the formula remains the same, A transpose A inverse A transpose Y. You just construct that A matrix properly, okay. And the point I am trying to make is, see, this is actually of the form, the second one, the quadratic model is actually of the form, this form. You had alpha plus beta x1 plus gamma x2. It is just that x2 happened to be x1 squared, okay. So what you are really fitting is actually a polynomial, a quadratic polynomial, but it can be thought of as a problem of multiple linear regression. The model is linear in these unknown coefficients alpha, beta, gamma, and you have individual regressors or independent variables, you can say n, n square, n cube, even though technically they are not independent. I mean, it's the same variable represented in different ways, okay. The solution methodology does not change, it doesn't matter, fine. So see, so what we have done is, you give me T and you give me n set of values, I can tell you how to get A and B. either using an optimization perspective or using a linear algebra perspective, and I get some fit. Okay, in this case, two-dimensional case, these are the fits, and I also showed you for the yield, temperature, pressure data, you could get a surface and you could plot it. Okay, so are we done? So that's where now the answer is no, we are not done. So what are the issues? So that's where now this is the motivation for actually going into statistics and saying, okay, what questions have not been answered? What will really happen in practice is that whatever parameters that you are estimating, okay, this A and B, okay, they are functions of many things. Your data size n, how many observations did you collect? Okay, the matrix A. So essentially, as I change these values of n, okay, n1, n2, maybe somebody would have given me one more observation instead of this last observation for n equal to 8. Somebody would have given me n equal to 10. Number of observations is still 8, but the last value of n has changed. So my A matrix changes. Will I get the same estimate? Okay, the answer is no. I will not get the same estimate of A and B. Okay, even if you repeat, see, sometimes you repeat the experiment. I fix this like my x. I fix this. I repeat the experiment where I compute the boiling points again. I will not get the same values of boiling points because something else may have changed in the experiment. Okay, there is anyway experiment. Somebody pointed out measurement error. I am measuring these or computing this by some method. There are errors there, so these numbers will change. What will happen to my estimates? The parameters, the coefficients, this A and B, they will again change, right? So my model parameter estimates depend on all these things: the number of observations I have, the points at which I am doing the experiment, and the measurements that I am obtaining. So any combination can happen that your A remains the same, but you simply repeat your experiment. This is typically happens certainly in academic settings and in teaching settings. The same experiment, different groups of students do. Everybody is told you open the wall by 10%, then 15%, 20%, and everybody, provided they don't copy, they have widely different numbers. So sometimes they copy and they get the identical numbers. Then you know, oh, there's no way you can get identical numbers. We don't know that. Okay, if they are naive, they will think, oh, I got perfect results. I got the same results as the other group. You tell them, boss, these are not perfect results. These are really bad results. Okay, because you got the same numbers. It's not possible to get same numbers. Okay, so your Y changes, the A matrix may have been the same, or the A matrix themselves is chosen. So if this is the case, that your estimates keep changing, okay, whenever you try to repeat the experiment or make some changes, then how do you make sense of those estimates? Which is the correct set? Okay, how do you, so your optimization or linear algebra, that A transpose A inverse A transpose Y will keep giving you some numbers. How do you make sense of that? How do you compare them? How do you compare those estimates? Okay, so essentially that's where the statistics help us. Using those estimates, what we are saying is, look, so we want to imbibe the idea is that whatever you are estimating is not really the truth. It's an estimate of the truth, and based on that estimate you really have a interval in which the true values could lie. Okay, so what you are getting when you are doing this is you are getting different values from that interval. So really we want to come up with not just saying that, okay, not just saying that some parameter is 0.057, but saying, okay, this is my estimate of that parameter, but the true parameter could be anywhere from 0.03 to 0.09 or 0.1. Okay, some such interval you want to give. So how do you give that interval? Okay, that unfortunately optimization or linear algebra does not tell us. Okay, similarly, yeah, so some of these questions, so if you have multiple candidate models, how does one systematically select the most suitable model? In this case, you have two models for explaining dependence of the boiling point on the number of carbon atoms. You get fits in both the cases. Which is a better model? Which one should I accept? Which one should I believe? How do you decide that? Yeah? Quadratic model. Why? Error is, see now, if you say, okay, so that's what one may think that, okay, I will go with the quadratic model because the error from these circles is smaller. How many circles you have in this one? Maybe 8 circles. Yeah. If I fit see here I am fitting 3 parameters. If I fit a 7th order polynomial, I will have 8 parameters. Okay. Essentially 8 equations. 8 equations I have, 8 parameters I have. I will be able to choose those 8 parameters by driving, which will drive all these errors to 0. I will get a perfect fit. Is that a good model? So answer is unfortunately no. Okay, that's not really getting a model. That's just passing a curve which obtaining curve which passes through all the points. But if I put n equal to 11, the whatever polynomial I will get which passes through all the points may not give me a correct value at n equal to 11. It may give a totally off value, because all I have done is passed a curve which fits through all the points but not necessarily captured the true relationship between the variables. Okay, so just by looking at the error, you cannot say, because error will be 0 if the number of unknowns equal to number of equations. So if you give me n observations, here I had 8 observations. Okay, I have 8 observations. If I put a 7th order polynomial, it will pass through exactly all those 8 points, right? But doesn't mean that's a good model. In fact, that could give you really bad result for some values of n which are not in this data set. Okay, so that's the thing, that just minimizing error, just saying whichever gives me the lower error, you can drive the error to 0 by choosing more parameters to play around with. Okay, that's not necessarily a good model.
There will be many data points. Fitting polynomial of that high degree is not practically effective.
Yeah, I mean that's another thing, that numerically, if the order becomes very high, if you have 100 data points, you will fit maybe 99th order polynomial. Yeah, so essentially you are solving 100 equations with 100 parameters and 100 error terms, so 200 terms, but 100 equations I can just simply choose all these error terms to be 0, and then I will left with 100 equations and 100 parameters. I will get a unique solution. Okay. So, but is that of use to me? So unfortunately the answer is in general no, because really I want to use this model to see what is the use of this model. I want to use it for now saying something about the process, maybe to predict what will happen at some other value. So until unless I have a model which I believe captures the underlying phenomena in some sense, okay, that model is of no use. So answer, all I am saying is this optimization or linear algebra does not give an answer for that. To get an answer for that, you have to look at it in more detail from a statistical point of view, that where is this error coming from, what are the properties of this error. Just saying this error has to be small is not enough. Okay, this error is actually a random variable. What are its properties? Whatever error I am getting, is it reflecting the properties of that error? Okay, so
But probably in most of the cases, because the interval in which the curve has been fitted is applicable only within that range. So the curve which has been fitted, if it is having passing through all those points, within that interval it will be quite applicable.
So good point. So what you are saying is, so if I were to just reframe your question slightly, what you are saying is normally we will use whatever model we are doing for interpolation. So if my data went from 1 to 10 or 1 to 8 over here, I will be using this model to predict values in this region itself, 1 to 8, not go outside beyond 8 or below 1. So not extrapolation. Probably you are correct, yes, often we do this, but see there could be still, it does not mean that within this region itself it is doing a good job. See here of course n cannot take 1.5 and 2.5 because number of carbon atoms, but you forget that it is number of carbon atoms. So will this quadratic model give me good value for the boiling point if n equal to 1.5? In general answer is no. You could have many cases. See, it is possible that your, for example, let us say your true relationship is indeed linear. What you observed were, oops, sorry, this. So see, let us say the true relationship is indeed linear between two variables y and x. You do not know it, of course. What you are observing are these points. Okay. It is possible that now because you go for a higher order polynomial, actually you will end up fitting something like this. can fit past the curve through all the points. Yes. Now you want to predict for some value of x over here. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. So see, what you have are just these points. What I am saying is that maybe the truth is it's a straight line relationship. You don't know it, of course. You simply say, okay, I will get that curve which minimizes the which essentially minimizes my error. So that curve is essentially which passes through all the points. Now use it to interpolate at this point. It will give you a value over here. Okay, which is away from the truth. This is the distance from the truth. If you had fitted a straight line, okay, maybe you would have got a straight line something like this. The straight line might have been a better fit to the truth than this curve. Okay, I mean, and you can take any, I can make it even more dramatic. Okay, this curve can behave in any way because it's simply forcing it to pass the points. Okay, so really, what is the so what is happening is really that's where the our understanding of this epsilon comes in. Okay, so really, see, the whole idea is that there is a part of the, so you're writing y as a function of your x and unexplained part. What is meant by the unexplained part? That there is a component of y which can be modeled or explained by this x, but there is some component which cannot be explained by x. To now say what this is, you have to either bring in new variables or so basically you have to bring in new variables because this y is affected by many variables. What you are including here are only a subset of those. There are many other things which you are not considering. All of them are getting lumped to this epsilon, whatever is there and missing. So that's what I talked about yesterday, that in system identification people initially were worried about getting the perfect model. Perfect model, I would not have this epsilon. You give me your x's or z's over here, I will tell you exactly what y should be. You go to the lab, you will measure, you will find that y exactly. But that's not possible because there are just too many variables, the phenomena are too complicated. This y will be a function of 10,000 variables, I only have 10 over here. Remaining 9,990 variables, their combined effect is getting lumped into this parameter epsilon. What I am observing is really, whatever data points I am observing are a combination of those two. The effect due to x part and the effect due to the parameters or the variables which are not in the model, the epsilon. So now when I want to fit a surface, really my surface will only give me the effect of x part. So actually I don't even want, ideally also I would not want to have a surface which passes through all the points, because then I am trying to model, I am trying to incorporate this effect also as part of this, which is not possible. I know that there is some, even if you know the true value of these parameters, so let me put it other ways, even if you knew the true value of these parameters, y will not be exactly equal to this term. There will always be some part which is left unexplained. That's why when I fit a model, I don't want to drive this to exactly 0. If you are saying this is 0, I would say you have done an overfit. Okay, you are trying to explain something which should not have been explained, because that's the nature of the problem. Even if you knew the true values, okay, there is some unknown truth. Even if you put the true values, y will not be equal to this exactly. It will always be equal to this plus something, and that something is not 0. Okay.
So this might be true for the generalized case, but suppose if my endpoints are known to me, that interval is known to me, then if I'm using a curve fitting tool in MATLAB, then in that case all the values, your SSC, your the statistical parameter values, the equation, everything, what do we get? It is for that range whatever error, along with the error and the permissible values. We know, like if the error is this much, it is within a permissible limit. So then in that case, won't it work? Won't that do?
Yeah, so see, I am not sure what you mean by permissible limits. See, all I am saying is just saying that I will drive errors to 0, and whichever curve gives me 0 error is the best. That's not going to work.
Confidence interval is mentioned. Within that confidence interval, that range of the error is also there. Like how much variations And if it is within that allowed limit,
Yeah, so there is basically you have to say what is an allowed limit for error,
yes, that
right?
is theoretical only.
So you have to make some assumptions and say that. So that's, yeah, I agree with that. So basically that's the whole thing I am going to, that's what I am also driving at, that really you have to make some assumptions about what this error is, and then whatever errors you are observing for your fitted curve, you have to say, okay, see, you are getting some values of epsilon 1, epsilon 2 once you fit these, once you fix these parameters. So whatever values you are getting, are they consistent with the assumptions that you made for this error to begin with? If they are consistent, yes, you stop. So to say they are consistent means that their magnitudes are within some, it could mean that their magnitudes are within some range. It could also mean they are independent of each other.
In that you get the prediction graph also, so there are 3-4 parameters like statistical parameters plus mean variance, standard deviation, and also the prediction curve. So all these factors together, then you can define the mathematical model.
Yeah, I mean, so for any mathematical model you choose, see, you will get these errors.
Yes.
And now if you have, that's what, if you have now some upfront some assumptions about these errors, you can say which of these models satisfy these assumptions. And see, that's another thing, but you have to also be careful with MATLAB is that, see, it will still not be able to tell you, see, if you give a model, it will probably tell you, oh yeah, this model meets your assumptions or not by giving those confidence intervals. But how do you know? There could be another model which does better than this. That's another possibility, right? So still, as a user has to exercise his or her judgment that, okay, maybe there is some form, something which is there which I fix, and then, or I have a 3-4 candidate models, I can compare them. But I think if you ask the question which is globally the best model, that's in general not an answerable question. Okay. So I'm not telling you a solution of this problem. All I'm trying to motivate is that, yes, just by saying that give me a relationship which drives this error to 0 is not going to be the correct answer. It's not going to lead you to something useful. Okay. So in fact that's what, so see, sometimes recently or a few years back I was attending some presentation of some student, and the student had this data from a bioreactor. And see, now because of this idea that you pass a curve, see, if you, some of these softwares, see, student is measuring some product that he is generating in a reactor as a function of time. Okay, so he, unfortunately for that student, see, the measuring how much is the product at a particular time is a very complicated exercise. He has to take a sample from that setup, and that sample then you have to freeze it, and then there is an elaborate protocol. It takes 6 hours, 10 hours for him to just take one measurement. So he cannot do it very frequently. So you will have one measurement maybe after 6 hours. So that essentially the students, they sleep in the lab, they put an alarm clock, they get up every 6 hours, they'll take a measurement, freeze it, put it in the refrigerator, and then do the protocol. So the measurements are really sparse. So in the morning at 10 a.m. the experiment started. He got some measurement. Let's say at 9 a.m. he got some measurement. 10 a.m., 11 a.m. and maybe the student forgot. Oops. Sorry about that. Okay. So I am plotting this y versus x. The measurements are taken every hour. Sometimes he misses. Okay. He skips 2 hours. It becomes 1 p.m. Then maybe he skips several hours. It becomes 6 p.m. He gets these measurements, something like this. Okay. And some such curve is there, and so the student goes on and fits maybe some polynomial, and what these softwares will also do if you are not careful. If you just plot these graphs in some softwares, they will automatically fit a curve which passes through all the points. Okay, you are not specifying any model, but that's the nature of that plotting software. It will essentially give you a curve, smooth curve, which passes through all the points. Okay, and now if you are not careful, if you don't have your own hypothesis, what should have been a model, what is a reasonable model, how do I interpret it? Based on this, student will say, oh, at this point the maximum occurred. Okay, which from the physics of the problem may not be feasible. It is just an artifact of some plot you have fitted. The software has fitted something. Okay, if the software had fitted something else, okay, maybe it would have fitted something, I don't know, maybe a line, straight line. Then you would have say, oh, the maximum is going to occur sometime in future. Okay, So just because you got some maxima based on this curve which passes through all the points, you cannot conclude anything. You need to have independent verification and your own insights, and maybe you have to repeat the experiment. If you repeat the experiment, again these points will shift. Next time maybe you will get some other values. At the same time, you will get some other values, and now your curve will be totally different. Whatever you were saying earlier was maximum at this x. Now with these circles, you will actually, so each point has only moved slightly, but your fitted curve has totally changed. It has become minimum now, local minimum. Okay. So sometimes students, if they are not careful, they will rely on these curves which are automatically generated by these plotting softwares, and based on that they will try to make some conclusion. Okay, so that's not always a good strategy. Yeah. In fact, I would say that's never a good strategy. You should have a model, and you have to say something. You can't just fit something and say, oh, it passes through all the points and I am done. Okay. So the point is that to answer questions as what is a good model, okay, you need to have a statistical, to answer questions about what's a good model, what's an adequate model, you need to have a statistical approach. Okay, so yeah.
Use data is available, and if we divide this use data in number of sub-intervals, and for each sub-interval if we get different curve,
So
at time for another interval we can use another curve. Is it possible?
yeah, see, you can fit whatever. I mean, there are things like splines, for example. They will fit a cubic in for every sets of 3 points. You can fit whatever. There is a fundamental difference. See, whether you get something useful or not, I mean, that may be case specific. Some cases you may get something useful, some cases you may not get. But really, see, there is really the point boils down to what is this epsilon. If you have reason to believe that okay, there is a model, there is a reality. In reality, I don't know what that model is, but in reality, there is a relationship between t and n, such that if you tell me the truth, if I were God, I will really know what this relationship is, and then that error, I can drive this to 0. If you say that, okay, it is possible with whatever data I have captured enough independent variables in my data, and now it is okay for me to expect a model which will actually give this error as 0. That's what you are doing when you are fitting splines or something, because the thing about those splines or passing through all the points is that your curve is passing through all the points. This error is 0. Okay, in every observation error is 0. Okay, that's now your premise that actually I can get a model. It is possible to get a model where the error can be driven to 0. But in practice, in general, that's not possible. That's not true. So in statistical viewpoint, we are saying, look, no matter what you're going to do here, okay, there is always a certain component which cannot be explained by function of n alone. I can put n square, n cube, whatever I want. I put sine n, e to the power n, anything I can put over here. This is a function of n. It could be linear, quartic, non-linear function. But the point is that no matter what you do, okay, even if you knew the truth, the true function of n, there will be always an error, because this temperature is a function of several other things which you have no information about. So as a result, I don't want a curve which actually gives me an error of 0. Okay, I will be very unhappy if you give me a curve where error is going to 0, because I know that's not possible. That's not my aim. My aim is to get a curve where this error is reasonable. Reasonable, now I have to quantify. What do you mean by reasonable? Should it be very small, very large? So that's where now I have to make some assumptions. What this error should be? What are the properties of this error? Okay, and then whatever curve you are fitting, the residuals from that, are they satisfying the assumptions of this error? So things like spline and all, there is a fundamental difference between spline and this ideas of regression. Here you expect and you want the error to be non-zero really. If that's what I said, if some students come and they give some results where the errors are going to 0, they have a model which explains the observations perfectly, I know that they fudged the data. Okay, if you take real experimental data, it's not possible to get error as 0. That means you have manipulated the data. Okay, So really, so when you do splines and all, the philosophy is different and the uses are thus different. Maybe you want to do something else. I mean, it's in no way I am saying that those are useless, not at all. But I am saying there's a different philosophy, different use. Okay, maybe you want to do some. So you will get some reasonable values when you want to interpolate. See here, the idea is you want to find out the true relationship. Yeah, not just be able to explain locally, but really to understand what is the phenomena, what is the physics. Why should this t increase when n increases? Okay, if you first you get that, and then maybe you can try to explain it. Okay, so there is a fundamental difference in the philosophy. Yeah. So what we are doing over here is that we are assuming that this error is there. You cannot do anything about. You want a model where this error is reasonable. So to answer what is reasonable, you of course need to get into statistics. This is where your optimization and linear algebra will not help you. Those insights are very useful, but you need to get into have a statistical approach to answer those questions, and that's really the motivation for having a course on in engineering department on multivariate statistics. Because some of these optimization ideas, this linear algebra, the basic calculus, differentiating, projection and all, students, I think in most colleges, students do some basic courses in maths, the science courses in their first year, second year in undergrad level, right? So some of these things are covered, and I think increasingly, a lot of these things are moving to even the class 12th. So this year I was really surprised. I was teaching this second year course on probability and statistics, and Sachin's children are, one has just completed 12th and one I think is in 11th or 12th, and he was teaching this course for the first time. I have taught this in the past. He said, oh, all of this is already there in class 11th. Okay, so things like Bayes rule, conditional probability, it's all there in the CBSE syllabus now in class 11, 12. So whatever, so and that's what I didn't realize that somewhere in the middle of the course the attendance was very low. So I was asking students why the attendance is low. One student says, oh, this is all boring, we have already done this. So half of the course it has, since the time when I did my 12th and so many years later, things have moved up. Kids are anyway doing tougher and tougher things now. Okay, so a lot of this optimization, so the point I'm trying to make is, see, this linear algebra optimization, several of them have probably done or they know some aspects of it. To minimize something, you differentiate it, equal to 0. Okay, all that they know. I mean, they probably know it in much earlier than even 11th. I don't know what age they learn that. So why should one should have such a course, given that A transpose A inverse A transpose Y you can derive in so many ways. In just one lecture you can derive it using linear algebra or optimization. The reason is this: you should have a course on statistical analysis because you want to answer some of these questions, choosing a most suitable model from a set of candidate models. Okay, if you use the identified model for prediction, what will be the error in prediction? If I use this quadratic model and say at n equal to 10 the value will be over here, will the true value really be here? Can I say how far the true value can be from this point? Can I give a range on the true value? Okay, my predicted value using this curve at n equal to 10 will be this value, but will the true value really be there? Actually no, but can I then give some interval that look, my guess is over here, but then it could be anywhere in this interval and I am 95% sure about it. Okay, so how does one give such intervals, essentially quantify uncertainties in the model predictions? Okay, so your linear algebra optimization doesn't help, so you really have to look at it as a problem in probability and statistics. So see what just I'll take another 2-3 minutes. See what is there in your pen drive, and I think I had given you this as a printout yesterday. Whatever we derived, see this A transpose A inverse A transpose Y, there is another handout which I had given to you yesterday on multilinear regression. So in this handout the same thing is derived now using a statistical point of view, no optimization, no linear algebra, just now bringing in some ideas of statistics. So basically maybe in the next class I will dwell upon it briefly, essentially really the idea is that let me see if I have it. Yeah. Really the idea is, see, if you are fitting this model, y is alpha plus beta x plus let's say gamma x square plus, this was the error term. Really this, you make some assumptions on this error, okay, and this you have to now say this is a random variable, it could take any value in certain range, okay. So it's like tossing a coin, you can get heads with certain probability, tails with certain probability. Same way now you can talk about this error, okay, it can take value in certain region with so much probability. So essentially we make some assumptions, typically we assume it to be Gaussian, and if you make that assumption, then all these, this y becomes a random variable for you. So now using the idea of random variables, you can again construct what is called as a likelihood function, and maximization of this likelihood function will give you the same relation A transpose A inverse A transpose Y for those parameters. Essentially this is that value of the parameters which maximizes the probability of observing the data that you have. So there is some, I mean, derivation behind it, but what is there in this handout is an approach which is coming just from a statistics point of view, no optimization, no linear algebra, okay. But after you make some reasonable assumptions on that error, that epsilon which was sitting there in the model. So but the nice feature is you get back the same solution, okay. So in terms of the parameters it's the same solution, but having formulated the problem in statistical terms, you can answer some of the other questions which I listed, which is a good model, how small epsilon should be, have I fitted an adequate model, okay. If I predict, use my model to predict something, can I give a band on that prediction instead of just saying one value, okay. If I repeat the experiment, I will get a different value of theta, can I upfront tell you where those values of theta could be, in what range, okay. Some of those questions you can answer provided you take a statistical viewpoint, okay. So in the next class I will probably briefly through some examples. Say solution meaning the same. So yes, this solution is the same.
Okay, so then in that case probably it's easier to use linear algebra in the beginning and then just go through the
So
statistical
yeah, so say the optimal parameter vector for the given data y and the given A matrix is given by this. Whether you use linear algebra or optimization, all of them are telling you this is an optimal solution in some sense. In optimization you are maximizing some, minimizing something. In projection again you want some optimal projection in some sense. In statistics you are again maximizing some function, likelihood function. So the formula is the same, and that's why I said it's such an elegant solution. You can arrive at it from different points of view. So pure mathematician can understand this because he will simply say, oh, it's a vector spaces going from one vector space to another. Somebody who does not know anything about statistics, somebody like an engineer, will probably find optimization more useful. Okay, it's an optimization problem, you want to minimize something, there you get, okay. And a statistician can also give the same formula. So this is the starting point. Yes, you reach this formula, this expression from various viewpoints. But if you want to now go further, okay, answer some of these questions. What will, when I change y, this thing changes. What does it mean? Which is a good value of theta now? Okay. For a given y, of course this is unique, but if the y changes, and y will change if I repeat the experiment, I will get some other theta which is a better value, okay. If I use the model which we have got to predict something, what can I say about that prediction? Those questions now optimization or linear algebra is not helping you, okay, because they don't have those tools for really talking about the error term which was sitting in the model. That you have to necessarily bring in statistics, yeah. So this is really the motivation. What I have done in last two lectures is really the sort of derive this from different approaches, and this is really the motivation for students, that why should they learn statistics. This is not really the end point. For us, this is really the starting point now. In a course of regression, this is the starting point. Okay, so next class I will sort of give you some brief ideas without going too much into the statistical theory, just ideas of things that you can do using some examples. So basically those residuals, errors and confidence intervals, those sorts of things I will briefly talk about in the next class. Okay, so let's stop here then. Thank you very much.